That is not 36. Don't tell Hamilton this, but I'm getting 37 millimeters across the narrowest part of this case. That's a good thing. There were 2 watches from the movie Interstellar, one of my favorite movies, by the way. There was Cooper's big Pilot Aviation day-date, and then the watch that he gave to his daughter, Murph. The Murph, we know, was downsized to 38 by Hamilton a couple years ago. The Aviation day-date, they just did in 36, or what I measure to be 37. And you know what? This might be my favorite new Hamilton right now. Hey guys, I'm Max, and this is Watch Crunch. It's been a little bit of a dramatic week in the watch world, right? Mr. Talking Hands, Andrew Morgan, he has left Watchfinder. It's the end of an era. Luckily, Andrew will continue to educate and entertain us on his personal channel, AMW. He's also all over the Watch Crunch app, so if you want to go mix it up with him, go follow him there as well. It feels like the trend towards smaller watches is not a fad, but here to stay. And as someone with a skinny 6.5-inch wrist, I'm all over it. When I see a 42 millimeter watch online, unless it's like a Seiko diver, I pretty much always just swipe left. But Cooper's watch from Interstellar looked big and pancakey even on Matthew McConaughey's wrist, and there is an argument to be made that pilot watches ought to be large and in charge, you know, for doing pilot stuff.
Come on, man, do some of that pilot shit.
But going from 42 all the way down to 36 is a big downsize, and I personally was concerned that it was going to be too small. First impressions, luckily out of the box, is that it's big enough. Like, it feels small but with presence. And as you've seen, it's actually more like 37. If you include those big crown guards, now it feels almost like a 38, akin to the Seiko Sarb, for example. The lugs, they are longish, stretching this watch still out to 45 millimeters lug to lug, but they do have a nice downward contour. But despite the masculine stance of the case, it remains thin at just 11.5 millimeters, making these almost perfect proportions for me. Okay, with sizing out of the way, let's talk about the second surprise out of the box, is that this watch is listed as having a blue dial on the Hamilton website. Sometimes I'm a little colorblind, but even my friends have verified that this is more like a purpley blue. Is that a bad thing? I don't know. We don't have a lot of purple watches out there. The grape Rolex OP comes to mind, but the steely purple with a strong sunburst was an interesting twist. I kind of like it. And if that doesn't work for you, Hamilton does offer this watch in just plain black and white dials as well. This dial layout is classic pilot's watch design with a minute track outboards of a separate inner hour track, because, you know, minutes are more important if you're flying an airplane, I guess. I especially like the exaggerated skeletonized hands, loomed in such a way that they dodge each other even when they come full overlap. And the loom itself is perfectly serviceable. I mean, it's no like Tudor diver, but it'll get you through a dark tunnel, no problem. This is all finished with a big triangle at the 12 to remind pilots which way is up. And unlike our biggest complaint for the Murph, the Pilot Aviation has great anti-reflective. So even outdoors on a sunny day, the dial remains nice and crisp, and it gives off a little bit of a blue hue at certain angles. Turning the watch over, Hamilton shows us the familiar H10 movement, which I feel like is a great option at the $1,000 price point. Yes, its architecture is based on the ubiquitous ETA 2824, which is a Swiss workhorse found in almost every Swatch brand in some variant. But here, the power reserve is improved from 38 to a whopping 80 hours, only sacrificing half a beat per second from 4 to 3.5. For me, power reserve is really one of the top items in my movement wish list at this point, because if you own more than a handful of watches, it's really a pleasant surprise when you pick one up after a long weekend to find it still ticking away. Oh, and let me remind you again that the Hamilton version does not have plastic parts in it. Tissot. All of the above makes this one of my favorite Hamiltons right now, so it might surprise you that I don't actually want one. But why? It's 37 millimeters by 11.5, great wrist presence, fantastic sunburst style, more than adequate movement for the price. It's ostensibly perfect. Yes, and at the risk of being overly dramatic, it's been a little bit of an emotional roller coaster this week with this watch. And it's not a knock on the Bracelet, because that's a pretty straightforward oyster, and though it does use an annoying pin and collar system. At least we're getting a pretty solid clasp with 3 micro adjustments to find a comfortable fit. It's fully brushed just like the rest of the case, and that's very appropriate for the aviation theme. I've come to the conclusion that I'm the problem. I'm obsessive compulsive about watches and other things. I'm probably too much of a purist. I anthropomorphize these little objects and I think about them 25 hours of the day. But for me, I'm having trouble seeing this watch for what it is and ignoring what it could have been and thinking that maybe this is a little bit of a missed opportunity. So here's the deal. The 36 not only downsizes the watch, it also drops a signature feature of the 42, and that is the date function. This might seem like a small omission, but details matter. And going back and looking at the 42 with the big day function emblazoned across the 12, that was part of that watch's charm. And without it, it loses a little bit of that spirit, that professional air. It leaves the 36 feeling a little sterile, like it's more of a pilot-inspired watch than the genuine article. And then you add the sunburst dial, and it feels like a little bit of a fashion homage to the 42. And I know the strategy here is probably to also appeal to a female audience. I know our friend Minute Meg is really digging her 36 Pilot Aviation. She has the gold version. See, for me, a 40mm version, but retaining the date would have been like the perfect middle ground. But then looking at Hamilton's catalog, they have plenty of 40mm pilot's watches. The Murph 38 is simply a downsizing of the 42mm watch, and visually it's essentially identical. Now you can say that they took away the little Morse code printing on the second hand, but that's almost invisible and to most enthusiasts pretty inconsequential. The Aviation 36 on the other hand looks like a different watch than the one that was featured in the movie. Alas, I just can't picture Cooper wearing a 36 in Interstellar unless he was also wearing like bell bottoms and driving a Beetle. Okay, that's a little harsh, but what do you guys think? Does the 36 lose too much of the spirit of the Pilot Aviation? Let's continue the discussion on Watch Crunch. Also, check out the Zero Pass straps below if you want something that looks like a NATO but wears like a dream. All right, guys, see you in the next one.